Mm-hmm.
because four outfits, as you know, control 85% of America's meat supply. Because there's so little competition within the industry, it has driven scale beyond what it would be if there were a more whatever fair market, free market, open market. I don't know whatever word you want to use there.
I'm Carson Jorgensen. And this is the Carson Jorgensen Podcast. Hey everybody, one of the questions I'm most often asked when it comes to agriculture is, how do we find your products, or where do we buy local? Folks, the guys at Crofter have been working on solving just that. They've created a marketplace that connects the producers to the consumers. You can get high quality products shipped to your front porch. Also, if you're a producer and you need an easier route to get your product to those consumers, visit crofter.com. Fill out the producer application and become a distributor on that marketplace. Again, that's crofter.com for high quality agricultural products shipped directly to your door. Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast today. Today, joining me is kind of the man, the myth, the legend when it comes to regenerative agriculture, Joel Salatin. Joel, thanks for joining me today. Hey, for those of you who don't know Joel, I'm going to have him introduce himself because his story is quite unique and most folks probably do know him.
Well, thanks a lot. It's great to be with you, and it's a real honor and a delight. Yeah, so our story starts. Well, actually, my grandfather, my dad's dad, was a charter subscriber to Rodale's Organic Gardening and Farming magazine in like 1945. Dad got the non-chemical bug, and he wanted to farm, and after he flew in the Navy in World War II, and and then so he schemed, how do I get, I don't have any money, don't have any land, how do I get started farming? And he was always, out there on the edge, visionary. He said, I know, I'll go to a developing country where land is cheaper and, there's less. I mean, this was 19 late after World War II, 1947. He was already seeing the inroads of socialism and stuff in this country. Ayn Rand had just written Atlas Shrugged, and so anyway, he went on a GI Bill. He got his degree in business administration. Went to Vermont to Middlebury for a semester of Spanish. Hitchhiked from Vermont to Mexico to live with a Mexican family for 6 months. Came back, sat for the Foreign Civil Service exam in Spanish, passed it first go, got on as a bilingual accountant with Texas Oil Company to Venezuela, to the Wildcat Ventures in Venezuela. And in 7 years, saved up enough money to buy a 1,000-acre farm in the highlands of Venezuela up on the equator. And he said, well, what they need here is chickens and dairy. That was what the two things he saw that they needed. And so we started raising chickens first because they're quicker turnaround. And I had my brother was older, and then me, and there we are out there. And in just a couple of months, he took over the entire chicken business in that local community because our chickens were so clean. And all the vendors that would take, this is 1950, all the vendors that were taking them around the in the city were always trying to find cleaner, healthier chickens. Well, ours beat the. You know how those Latin American markets are. All the farmers come into their stalls, and you got the banana man and the papaya man and the chick, and that's right, that's right, or a lady, right, and a senora, and so they'd sell the chickens live. The vendors, they'd come and buy from the farmers, and they'd tie them to a pole. And they'd carry these poles, down through the city, and they'd have their routes like the ice cream man, And if you wanted chicken for supper, you bought a chicken. Anyway, ours were so clean that the farmers, we took a lot of their business away. That they didn't like that, but they accused us of black magic and voodooism. Because there's no way you can do this otherwise. So a lot of animosity built up there. And then when there was a junta, a rebellion there, a coup d'état there in 1959 with Pettis Jimenez. Basically, the machine guns came in the front door. We ran out the back door and lost everything. and couldn't get any protection or anything. Dad was 39, and after spending another year trying to stay, trying to get protection, trying to stay, only thing to do was to come back to the U.S. We came back Easter Sunday, in 1961, and Dad wanted to go back, and so we settled here in Virginia, close enough to the embassy, Venezuelan embassy, that if things settled, that we could get back to the embassy and be back on the farm quickly. Well, that never happened, but that's why we didn't go back to the Midwest, where he and Mom's family were both from. Settled on this rock pile gully, cheapest place we could find here in Virginia Shenandoah Valley, and and Dad says, well, how do I make a living on this farm? So he had all the experts. He had government people, private people, like Doan management consultants and things come out. Every single expert said, well, you got to plant corn, build silos, borrow more money, buy more chemicals, graze the woods, all this stuff. And of course, Dad knew that wasn't correct. He saw the chemical approach as kind of a drug addiction. You got to get more and more to get the same kick all the time. And and so we just started experimenting. He read Andre Voisin, and got onto grass management and moving cows around. Met a guy that did portable infrastructure. We started building portable chicken and rabbit shelters and things, and moving them around. And but still couldn't make a living on the farm, or at least make the farm pay a mortgage and a salary. So he went off farm to work, and Mom went off farm to work as a school teacher, and the two salaries paid for the farm in about 12 years. So I'm coming up as a teenager, and I want to farm full time, and I'm starting to, how do I do this? Well, Dad realized early on that direct marketing was the way a small farm. If a small farmer wore all the middleman hats, the distributor, the marketer, the processor, uh, and tapped into the retail dollar, that was about the only way that a small farm could actually get off that scale treadmill, where you've got to get bigger to stay in business. And so we began direct marketing. And when I came back from college, I jumped on that as well, and start then so now I'm working off the farm. How do I make a living on this small farm? And now I'm working off the farm, and Teresa and I got married. We fixed up an attic in the old farmhouse, and made an apartment up there. And by living cheaply, we drove a $50 car. She cooked everything from scratch. If we didn't grow it, we didn't eat it. We never went on vacation. We never went anywhere. Didn't go to a movies. We don't drink coffee. We didn't have a TV, and we just dedicated ourselves to this. And by living so cheaply, we were able to save half of our paychecks. And in 2 years, we're able to save up enough money to live on the farm 1 year without any outside income. And so September 24, 1982, I walked out of that. I was a newspaper reporter. Walked out of that office, and said, "Well, we can go for 1 year." I fully expected to have to go back to work after a year, but as it turned out, we never did. Now it was about 3 years till we could exhale, and whew, I think we're going to make it. Yeah, yeah. It took about 3 years, but now we've built, I don't know what, 20 ponds over the years. We have irrigation capabilities. We have 12 miles of water line, gravity fed permaculture style that feeds water over the whole place. We have about 22 salaries here. We ship nationwide. We're into beef, chicken, both meat and eggs, turkey, pork, lamb, duck eggs, lumber, forestry products, and we have about 15,000 visitors a year. We do farm gatherings and events for as a host site for organizations, and it's an exciting time.
No, it is, and I mean, but that story sounds all too familiar for people. Getting wanting to work the farm, but having to get a job to pay for it,
Yeah.
but that seems to be the reality for a lot of farmers nowadays. And y'all have figured out how to thread that magic needle. But what the United States has kind of found itself in, and you and I have talked a little bit about what's going on with agriculture in the United States and where it's headed. How, I mean, this is kind of a loaded question, but how do we find that balance? Because there's nothing I'd rather see than everything holistically raised and small farms producing everything locally. But we're kind of beyond that as a city or as a country because these big cities, I mean, we're feeding places like Los Angeles and New York and all of these other places. So how do you see us going forward as a country feeding these big population centers and yet doing better in ag? Because I've said this a million times, in the quest to create cheap food, we've created processes that are not very good. And I'm not saying that all of them are not good, but there's a few of them that are questionable. So how do we, find a way to bridge that gap back and forth between, this small raised direct to consumer versus the big production agriculture, so that we're able to feed everybody?
Yeah, certainly. So the two most common questions, and you're hitting right on them, that I get asked are a, this sounds cute and warm and fuzzy, but can we really feed the world this way?
Right.
And number two, even if we could, can we afford it? Those are the those two big questions. And so let me start by uh, agreeing 100%. I travel a lot, I speak a lot, and I'll tell you what, when you're 100 miles away from a Coke machine, direct marketing is tough. And as a direct marketer who is branded, I get it. In fact, it's been tough right here in our area. I mean, we live 10 miles away from a town of 20,000 people. It's not a big, not a big city. We live on a dirt road, here 10 miles from a 20,000 person town, which is more than adequate to buy everything that we produce, plus a whole bunch more of us just to serve that town. But we have a little handful of local clientele people, but by and large, that is not our customer base. We've had to go 3 hours away, toward DC, down to Richmond, Virginia, bigger cities. And in 2019, we began shipping UPS shipping nationwide, and that has been a game changer. Roughly the 10 years prior to that, it actually became logistically possible. Before then, it wasn't logistically possible. But distribution logistics have changed completely, as you know. Everything from DoorDash to UPS to whatever, it has changed dramatically. So now the nice thing is, when I get into rural areas, I mean, again, when you're very, 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 very rural, the shipping option is actually a possibility now,
Yeah.
unlike what it was a long time before. And what's happened is that the cost of brick and mortar, the cost of maintaining a physical brick and mortar facade, has escalated dramatically over the last 20 years, while the cost of electronic aggregation, i.e., website shopping carts.
Yeah.
Amazon is an electronic aggregator. Everything that's on their website, they don't have in a warehouse somewhere. Now they have a lot of it, but most of it is not. And so electronic aggregation has been a game changer in allowing a group of farmers, a regional group of farmers, to get together under a geographic umbrella brand, or to amalgamate. I mean, it seems like every 2 weeks I'm getting a call from somebody who's developed another direct marketing platform, to link up farmers directly with consumers.
Yeah.
And so what's happening is, as the cost of brick and mortar interface has escalated, the cost of distribution has decreased. And so what used to be just completely, price impossible to do, even 15 years ago, has now become extremely possible. I mean, even now, goodness, I mean, we ship everything frozen, and we use dry ice. And even just within the last 2 years, we've had new software developed to where, it used to be that we had to kind of, well, how far is this going? What's the weather look like? And we kind of eyeball the little pellets of dry ice that we scoop in there. Now we have software automatically in our system. And listen, we're small potatoes. We're
Yeah.
not a big outfit. But we have software in the system now. We We stick a box on, the computer automatically looks at the zip code, how far it is, checks the weather, the weight of the box, what we're putting in, and it spits out the amount of ounces of dry ice to go in that box.
No
We don't
kidding.
have to think about it anymore. And so this is all part of that. I mean, I'm in the meat business, okay, and like
Sure.
you're in the meat business too. So
Yeah.
you know we're not shipping apples and things like that. But on the heavy proteins, the meats, the cheese, the stuff like that, this is very very possible now. Now that said, on the produce side, the vegetables, fruit, that sort of thing, that's high water. You can't afford to ship water.
Hmm.
And so actually Cornell University up in New York did a study. Goodness, this has been like 5 6, it was before COVID. I call it BC, before COVID. um, they did this study, and they said all these population centers around the country, how far out would you have to go from these population centers to supply them with with their food. And what they found was that there was not a population center in the country, except New York City. New York City was the only one where they had to go into New Jersey, but otherwise everything could stay within the state, within, I think it was no more than 30 miles outside the periphery of the city, to be able to feed itself. Now, a
Wow.
lot of cities have a tremendous amount of acreage within the city. Like right, Detroit is the prime example of this, because there's been so much. It's in the Rust Belt. Detroit
Yeah.
has thousands of acres inside. St. Louis, St. Louis dropped 50,000 people per decade from 1950 to 2000, and so there are massive, massive empty lots, massive amounts. Um, and so on the succulents, I call them the succulents, the watery stuff, the cucumbers and tomatoes and apples and berries and things like that. Basically, all that can be raised within or nearby every urban center in the country. That would allow then the nutrient dense stuff, the lamb, the beef, the pork, the cheese, the non-watery nutrient dense stuff. It can be raised then in the other, in the other regions, and of course shipped in. And so you know I'm not a top down planner. What I'm doing is, what I like to do is, I like to just encourage people from the bottom up. But your question is a logistics question,
Yeah.
and I'm saying, look, there is absolutely no reason logistically why we can't feed ourselves, and we can do it primarily locally, especially on all the succulents and the watery stuff, and and then the hinterlands do the meats and the cheese and the heavy stuff. um, and if we conceive of it that way, then it's not like we need to legislate this into being. um,
Yeah.
the question is not, well, what policy should we do to make this happen? The question is, can it be done? And the answer is absolutely, it can be done. I mean, realize America has 35 million acres of lawn and 36 million acres housing and growing feed for recreational horses. That's 71 million acres. That's enough to feed the entire country without a single farm.
Yeah. No, and that's the people don't want to give, and not to mention how many dogs we feed in the United States. And I can't
Oh,
speak. Yeah, I mean, I have plenty of dogs, but
yeah.
people don't want to talk about that either. The meat products that it takes to feed all these pets out there that nobody
One
ever
fifth.
talks about.
Yeah. One fifth of all meat produced in the U.S. 1/5 of it, 20%, goes to pets.
Yeah.
20%.
That's, I mean, that's a big number. And I mean, that's just something, and we're not telling anybody give up your pets, but we also want you to step back and realize how much these pets are consuming. But how do you, like I say, it's great, and I appreciate that sentiment, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. But then you've got big folks like us and big folks down in Texas. I mean, we raise about 4,500 head of sheep. I mean, I know guys down in Texas that are feeding 4, 5, 6, 10,000 head of cattle. I mean, how do you see them surviving here in the future? How do you see them moving forward? Because we've looked into it. Direct marketing for people our size, it gets logistically pretty heavy, and especially when you're out on the farm trying to keep everything running throughout the day. How do you see the future looking for them? Where do you think they go from here?
So, so first of all, let me be straight up. I don't have the answer for everything.
Yeah,
I'm happy to say once in a while, I don't know. I don't have a recipe. It's actually hard to have a recipe for everything that's broken
sure. There's
and
plenty of it.
everything that's dysfunctional. And so I guess here's my short answer to that. If everyone who could would just think about that a minute. In other words, if everyone that was like us, near population centers, smaller farms, smaller. I mean, we've only got 1,000 head of cattle. Okay, now that's not backyard. It's
Man.
bigger than a lot,
Yeah,
especially here in the east. But it's not it's not 5,000. It's not 10,000. Okay, and 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 we live. Our farm is within 8 hours of half the U.S. population. So
right.
it's a little different ball game here. So here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say if everyone who could would, it would open up unbelievable opportunities for everyone that's not in our position. We can't right now. We can't imagine the opportunities that would open up for people that are farther away or more rural. Um, because the place is right here. I mean, I got a call when Burger King announced that they were going to go to cage free eggs,
Oh,
like
yeah.
8 years ago. The food writer for the Washington Post calls me for a comment. They're always calling me for a comment. And she says, "What do you think about that?" So what I think about that is we got we got better than cage free. Ours aren't even in a house; they're in a on pasture running around, and we're 10 minutes from a Burger King. What's the problem? Why do they need 10 years to roll this thing out? Uh, uh, what are they waiting for? They can come to us. We'd be glad to supply them tomorrow with eggs. And then I talked to some insiders, and they said, well, the reason they have a 10-year rollout is because they're hoping within 10 years that the consumer pressure for cage free eggs will wane. People will get tired of that, beating that drum, and they'll just be able to kind of go off into the night with their continued cage production model, and it'll all be okay, and
Sure.
everybody will forget about it. That's why they have such a long rollout. But Pat Foreman talks about this in her book City Chicks. She says if 1/3 of every household in America had enough chickens to eat their kitchen scraps, 1/3 of every household enough chickens to eat their kitchen scraps. So we're talking about 3 chickens, 6 chickens, 10 chickens.
Yeah.
All right, there would not be an egg industry in the U.S.
Mm. No, I
Now,
heard about a developed country. I think it was in Europe somewhere, and they
yeah,
they started a program, and every family got
yes,
3 chickens, and they reduced
that's
their
right.
landfill usage by 30%.
Yep,
And I
that's
mean,
right. Yeah, that's in the same book as a city in Belgium.
yeah,
Belgium put out a thing. They said we'll buy 3 chickens per house of anybody that wants to raise their chickens. And so they had 2,000 households in this city, and so they bought 6,000 chickens, distributed them into 2,000 households in the first month. That dropped their landfill waste by 100 tons.
yeah, wow,
So I guess at the risk of being seen as a uncharitable person, I would say in general, some of these big operations probably shouldn't be so big. And one of the
yeah,
reasons they're so big is because the price pressure,
hmm,
because four outfits, as you know, control 85% of America's meat supply. Because there's so little competition within the industry, it has driven scale beyond what it would be if there were a more whatever fair market, free market, open market. I don't know whatever word you want to use there, but if there were more access, if there were easier access for people like us, uh, for people at my scale, I think that it would actually have a whatever, a bypass effect throughout the industry, and it would enable maybe a farm that thinks they've got to have 6,000 head, and they think they could make it on 2,000 head, just because of the price competition that came in.
No, and I think this is where it comes to where government gets involved and where legislation gets involved and
Yes.
where the big things start to clash. I mean, you and I have talked over the last week about Secretary of Agriculture and what's going on there and the new appointments and why it's so important to the agricultural sector because of what's happening and what's going on in the government. Because you talked about free market or fair market or whatever it is. A buddy of mine says free market. Yeah, I'd like to try it sometime.
Yeah.
When you talk to politicians, they're like, "Oh, it's a free market." Well, it's not, because we're being made to compete with other countries who, one, are making an inordinate amount of money on the conversion rate between their dollar and our dollar. For one, a lot of countries can sell to the United States at half the cost and still be making more money than what the American producers are making. And two, we're being made to keep up with regulations. The new mandatory RFID is the latest one to come out. I mean, we are being saddled with regulations, regulatory burden, regulatory capture. You see the big people go in, spend their lobbying dollars, get control of the regulatory state, make it so it benefits them and the small guy. And all the while, we're not even enforcing laws like the Packers and Stockyards Act, and not taking care of our agriculture. And so this is where I believe that big ag and these bigger producers kind of clash, is because you've got the independent, and people have to realize this. And this is one thing I try to explain to a lot of people. Yes, you have big ag. Don't get me wrong. There is the big corporate ag. But then there are family farms that are extremely large, that have been doing it for a long time, that raise, thousands upon thousands of head, and they are not tied to these big corporations. But yet they are still beholden to them because, like you said, 85% of it is owned by 4 companies. And in the sheep industry, I think 82% of it is owned by 2 companies. I mean, we went from 56 million sheep in the United States to 5 million sheep when our population almost tripled. And yet, here we find ourselves outsourcing just about everything to other countries. So this is why, unfortunately, people like you and I have to get politically involved, because this is where it's headed.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've had a look. Let's be straight up here. We've had um, a campaign, if you will, to marginalize agriculture for a long, long time.
Yep.
When's the last time you heard a guidance counselor at a high school tell an honors student, "Wow, you're really smart, Jane. You're so smart. We need you in agriculture. You should be a farmer." We don't hear that. I mean, I still have emotional scars, from the last time I was at the guidance counselor in high school,
Right.
and she found out I wanted to. I said, she was, "What do you want to really be?" I said, "I want to be a farmer," and she about had an apoplectic seizure on the floor. I about had to call. Well, they didn't have 911 back then, but uh, I thought I was going to have to do CPR. I mean, she said, "What? Waste all those brains, waste all that talent, waste all that." That's the way our culture sees sees farmers, sees agriculture, and I've tried to create a new mystique. We have and rightfully so, we have a great respect and honor in our country. We've kind of developed this phrase in the last, well, since 911. First responders. We have this wonderful, all of us. Who doesn't get teary eyed? First
Yeah.
responders. Well, you know what? Farmers are the first responders for our natural resource base. And Wall Street can take a hike. Wall Street can do whatever it wants to, but if we don't have soil, air, and water, we're messed up as a civilization. And the rise and fall of civilizations throughout history can be traced directly to the stewardship of their own resources. A group of people comes into a resource rich area and begins to utilize it, exploit it, and so and gradually exploit it and rape it, and then it turns to rocks, and there's no trees
Right.
anymore. It's all shot to pot, and and the civilization collapses,
Yeah.
and we're heading that same direction in our
Mhm.
trajectory, and so if we don't create a mystique in our country that listens to and honors our resource. I call farmers now our resource first responders. Okay, we're gonna the place is gonna burn,
Yeah.
and so and by the way, that includes consumers, not um, consumers becoming more participatory and intentional in how they eat.
Yeah.
In other words, instead of getting everything with red dye 29 and monosodium glutamate, I mean, in 1940, America consumed 1 million pounds of monosodium glutamate. Today, 1 million pounds. Today, we consume 300 million pounds. That's
Wow.
almost a pound per person in the U.S. Monosodium MSG. Um, and so people need to understand that it's not the farmer. Farmers have always produced to the consumer demand,
Yep.
and if the consumers want convenience and chemicals and cheap, farmers can do it. We've
Yeah.
always done it, and so I
Because they're
don't
going to
let
do what they got to do to survive. I mean, that's just the thing.
that.
They have always done what they had to do to pay the bills, and they're still not paying the bills.
Yeah, yeah, and so when people, in since whatever 1950, the average percentage of retail dollar that the farmer gets has dropped
Hmm.
from 40% in 1950 down to 9% today. That means, think about this.
I was going to
That
say 12. I thought it was 12, but
Well, it is
either
different.
way, we're in bad shape.
Yeah, it is different on different commodities. But the point is that you could have a new ag policy. Try this on. There's our new ag policy. Farmers aren't going to be paid anything. They just got to work for nothing, and it would only change the price of food 10%. Is that not crazy? That,
Oh yeah, we say it as a joke, but in real life, it's like no, that's exactly what's happening.
yeah, it is, and a lot of that is because the consumer has gone to value added convenience. They're not getting
Mm.
butternut squash. They're getting butternut squash in a pre-made whatever frozen dinner, a hot pocket, or some sort
And
of.
a tray that you can put in the microwave for
Yes,
five
yes,
minutes.
yes, exactly. Uh, yeah, it's the equivalent to a little bale of hay, that's
Right.
pre-packaged and ready to go.
Ready to
No
go.
grazing. You don't have
Single
to go out.
serving, single serving hay bale.
And a single serving package with a lot of wrapped in a lot of plastic and cellophane, and there we are. And so I tell consumers, I say, how I know somebody gets it. I said, if you're eating leftovers, then your household gets it. Because if you're eating leftovers, that means you probably cooked from scratch. You ate communally as a family around the table, and there was leftovers. And so for me, that's kind of become a little litmus test when I talk to a non-farmer. Are you eating a lot of leftovers? Do you is that what you have for lunch? And so we have literally done this to ourselves, and there's
Hmm.
enough blame to go around. There's
Oh
enough
yeah.
blame to go around, and I for one, I got a fly here.
Oh, you're
Um,
good.
I for one, am not ready to just let the greater world out there point their finger at the farmer and say, well, you're to blame for this, and this. Yeah, farmers can shoulder some blame, but ultimately farmers respond to the marketplace
Well,
and
most of
whatever
the
that.
time they're just trying to survive.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
And that to me is a big point because I see a lot of people around the world. I mean, the climate folks in particular, John Kerry,
Yeah.
and Al Gore and the whole bunch of them. They always, it's always the farmer's fault.
Yeah.
It's always the farmer's fault. And for me, that has always been one of the things that rubs me the rawest, because at the end of the day, yeah, some of the blame ends up there, but again, as you said, they're responding to the market, and for me, they're just trying to pay the bills most of the time and not lose the farm that their grandpa started. And I mean, this is a prime example for anybody out there. Go try and buy a tract of land and get into agriculture and see if you can make it.
Mm.
Show me how, because that dream right now is unattainable, at least out here anyways. There's just no way to afford it and farm it out of it to actually pay for the ground. Some people can make it work in very small operations, but as far as these bigger operations go, if you don't inherit it, you're out of luck. I mean, a tractor's $400,000 when it used to be $7,500, and yet we're still getting paid the same as we were for lambs that we were in 1980. And here we are. I mean, I did a deal. We actually looked into it the other day. A pickup truck I think it was 1980 or late 70s was $2,800 or something off the showroom floor. The lamb price was like $1.56 or something like that. And nowadays, a truck's almost 90,000, and I think this year the lambs brought $1.72 or something like that. And that is the cost that farmers and ranchers are having to pay. But you touched on something back there, and I want to go back and talk about it a little bit. And it is these big corporations. They get to force what they want, and they use, a lot of times now, it has become climate change that they're using to force and get what they want out of the farmers and ranchers, because again, they don't have a lot of choice. So how do you see regulation in that fair market? How do we open it up to where everybody's on an even playing field, and yet we don't suffer? I mean, this is a totally loaded question, but we don't suffer those abuses that you see that would be the bad eggs in the basket. How do we open that up so that
Yeah.
everybody really does have a fair playing field?
Yeah. So I have thought a lot about that. And my answer will probably not please some people, but here's the thing. I'm an incrementalist. You
Yeah.
can't get the whole enchilada the first bite. You got to start somewhere, and so where I would start with what I call a food emancipation proclamation. Now, I know those are strong words, okay? A food emancipation. Where what we have, as you just described, we have a food system right now that's enslaved and shackled to an I would suggest a prejudicial regulatory environment that reduces the freedom of market choice, both for farmers to be able to sell and for consumers to be able to buy. In other words, if you came to my farm and you said, "Hey, I like what I see here. I'm looking around, smelling around. I've asked the neighbors. I'd like to buy a glass of raw milk from you. I can't sell it to you legally. Raw milk is prohibited." All right. Now I'm going to the tip of the spear here with raw milk, but the same thing is true if I had a lamb, and we have
Yeah.
uh, we raise sheep here, not anything like it at your scale, but we
Yeah.
have lambs. What if you came onto what if my neighbor, maybe that I go to church with, okay, comes over here and says, "Man, you've got the most beautiful lambs. Would you, when you butcher one for yourself, would you butcher one for me and I'll buy it?" I can't sell that lamb to that neighbor. All
Yep.
right. So what I run into thousands of farmers around this country that are ready to offer, um, dairy, meat pot pies, bologna,
Yeah.
charcuterie, pepperoni, okay, to their neighbors, tomato soup, for crying out loud, to their
Sure.
neighbors, and they can't sell it to them because we've got this top-down federal, what I call food police, that prohibit that kind of direct. I'm not saying I'm going to sell this to Walmart or Costco or export it to Thailand. I'm saying let me at least sell it to my neighbor, to a friend at church, to a niece, a nephew. All right, to the direct market, what's called the end user legally, to an end user. Let me do that. And here's the thing, if we did that, thousands and thousands of people like us, small operations, would enter the marketplace to their neighborhoods tomorrow. That would clip the wings of the JBSs and the Tysons, and it would clip their wings because suddenly there would be competition in the marketplace vying. And guess what? Then everybody like us, I mean, look, I'm completely unusual in my neighborhood too, even though I'm saying I'm 8 hours from half the nation's population. Nobody around me direct markets either. They all go to the sale barn. Okay.
Yep.
Now, I don't have a vendetta against the sale barn. I'm just saying that a lot more of us would exist if we could actually access and sell to our neighbors a free. I mean, this country, we're now in the freedom of choice movement, right? I mean, we got choice in the bathroom, choice in the bedroom, choice in the womb, but we don't have choice in the kitchen. If I want to come and buy one of your lambs or a lamb chop from you,
You
unless it
can't.
goes to a government approved facility, you can't sell it to me.
A
It's
federal government. Let's be clear. A
yeah,
federal government
a
facility. It
federal
can't even
government.
be a state government facility. It has to be a
Exactly.
federal
Yes.
government
Yes. Yes.
facility.
Yes. Exactly. Exactly. So if we did that, suddenly those big outfits would not have their oligarchy on the food system, and we'd have this groundswell of entrepreneurial activity boiling up from underneath, which would mean that those big outfits would now have to compete. They would have to compete with people like us, which means that their price to people like you would have to go up
Yep.
because we would actually have competition. Now, the other side, the folks who oppose this idea, they say, well, we got to have a level playing field. I mean, if Tyson has to go through these hoops, then so does Polyface have to go through these hoops. That's the name of our farm. And my response back then is, well, we're not playing the same game.
No.
I mean, that would be like saying, we're in the middle of a football season, right? Everybody's watching football. So imagine a new rule coming out of DC saying, okay, from now on, nobody can play a football game unless it's at an NFL approved, NFL certified stadium. We're not going to allow any Sunday afternoon backyard pickup football games. Guys get together and agree on, okay, the lilac bush and the clothesline of the goal posts and the field is here and here, and okay, we're not going to allow any of that anymore. The only way you can play football is at an NFL certified stadium. That's a level playing field, but we're not playing the same game. Okay, we're going to get together and, hey, we're going to play this game over here. And Uber and Airbnb have demonstrated that we can have now, with the internet and with social media and real-time accountability and monitoring, we can now privatize many of these licensed things like hospitality and like chauffeuring that were especially licensed in the system to protect the consumer. We don't need that anymore because we have real-time transparent auditing and monitoring through the global voice that's been created by the internet. And so it's time to Uberize our food system. It's time for our food system to have an Uber option as well, so that we can put pressure on Marriott, Sheraton, and Hilton, and that changes the playing field and the economic dynamics.
You bet it is. You bet it is. A friend of mine said this about politics, but he says the problem is we're playing checkers and the other side's playing tackle football with chainsaws. And I kind of feel like that's how it is
Uh-huh.
in agriculture is worse, but we're stuck. And that's, again, like you say, people don't realize this, but people ask all the time, where can I buy a lamb? How do I get a lamb from you? Where do we buy your meat from? It's like, I wish I could tell you, because we can't sell it in large enough quantities to make it pencil out here, because it has to go through a FDA facility. And these FDA facilities are hard to come by, and they're expensive to get online. And that's the hard part about these small processors coming online, is they're having to be FDA inspected. The regulations are enormous. It's
Yes.
almost impossible for these guys to even get started. I've seen a few pop up over the last couple of years
Yeah.
since COVID. I mean, if
Yeah.
there is a silver lining, it exposed some of the fatal flaws in our system right now. But going forward, I think you're right. I think rolling back regulation and deregulating is really going to be the only answer to create that even playing field. Is let everybody play the same game. Let them play the game that they want to play.
Exactly. Let them play the game they want to play. I mean, what most people don't know is that Don Tyson's grandpa and Frank Perdue's grandpa and Bob Evans that started the Bob Evans chain franchise chain, all of those guys started in the 1940s from the tailgate of a pickup truck. Today, you can't start from the tailgate of a pickup truck.
Yeah.
Now, those guys were entrepreneurs. They were savvy. Let me tell you, they worked long hours. I don't take a single thing away from them. Kudos on them for building,
Sure.
building a brand and building a name. Absolutely, that's great. All right,
Now let
but
somebody else do it.
yeah, but they now, and this is where RFK Jr. talks about agency capture. They now sit at the table with the regulators. So when the consumer advocacy groups, the Ralph Naderites and the sky is falling, henny penny, government please protect us, when they ask for protective regulation, the big guys are sitting at that table shepherding it to make sure that their compliance is way less per pound or per hundred than the compliance on a small plant. So I co-own. You may not know this. Teresa and I co-own a small community federal inspected slaughterhouse. We have about 20 employees. We do about 50, 60, 70 hogs a week, and 40 beef a week. Okay, it's this, and and we have the same compliance paperwork. We have to have an office for the inspector, a bathroom for the inspector. We have the same overheads in that respect as a JBS, as a Tyson that does 5,000 beef a day.
A
Okay,
day.
a day.
Yep.
And so what happens is what Iowa beef packers, for example, can do for a cost of about $80. It costs us about 400. Okay. And the result is a huge price prejudice in the marketplace. People say, why do local food so well? Local food's expensive, not because it's inefficient, but because it doesn't enjoy the scale, the scale efficiencies that the prejudicial regulatory requirements entail.
Yeah, they can spread it out over 5,000 head, and you have to consolidate it into 10.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like I remember well about 15 years ago, Ralph Nader was pushing for a regulation that every chicken processing facility had to do a bacterial test on every single day. Every single day they had to do a bacterial test, and the test costs, I don't know what, $500. Okay, well, if you're a Tyson and you're doing 300,000 chickens a day through a plant, a $500 test, it's not very statistically significant anyway, but it's no more than the cost of running the water cooler for the employees take a water fountain drink. Okay,
Yeah.
for us, when we're only doing 500 in a day, it's our whole profit for the day. It's the whole thing, and so that's how these regulatory the prejudicial regulatory confinements or refinements gets developed. And as you said, it costs so much to get in. So the way entrepreneurs launch their ideas to the marketplace is through embryonic prototypes. Like I said, Tyson started on tailgate of a pickup truck. Frank Perdue started on tailgate of a pickup truck. Okay, it starts embryonically, and if the entrepreneurial idea baby, okay, is too big to be birthed, i.e., a $2 million processing facility,
Yeah.
then then the baby's too big to be birthed, and it never gets birthed.
Never happens.
That's the problem. Now, to counter this, so this is why back in 2020, John Moody and I started the Rogue Food Conference. I don't know if you've heard of it. We're meeting around the country, the Rogue Food Conference. Our mantra is circumvention, not compliance. And we're finding farmers around the country who have figured out how to legally circumvent these regulations, and we're spotlighting them. We're encouraging people to to take what they're doing. So I'll give you a couple of examples. One of my favorite ones is now with the internet, you can have butchery courses. So when somebody comes to you and wants a lamb, you say, "Tell you what, sign up for my butchery course for $700, and part of the course materials is you get a free lamb." So the product becomes just it becomes part of the educational curriculum, and you're not selling meat. You're selling education, and giving away your
A
stuff.
lamb on the back end. See,
Lamb on the back end. There are people all over the country doing this already. I mean, and this is the
sure.
kind of stuff that we're showcasing. Another one is there's a food church in North Carolina. You join their church, and that entitles you to to get food from them, under the table. And the government tries to close them down, and they can't because they're under the freedom of religion. Um,
Good.
so there is some really cool stuff developing to handle what you're doing. So for you, maybe your market for lamb is only, I don't know, 100, 200 a year. I mean, direct market. Okay.
Sure.
Now that's not your whole production, but it's not even a lot. But if for those lambs you could get $500, $600, full retail. I mean, go to the
Yeah.
store, look at the price of lamb. Lamb's crazy expensive in the
Right.
store.
And,
Yeah.
and yeah, the farmers and ranchers are getting robbed.
Yeah. I mean, you're getting whatever, 100, $120,
Yeah.
maybe, you know, um,
Sounds no, that's about where we're at. 150 maybe.
yeah, yeah. If everything goes well, and the retail is up there in the 5 to 600 range, and so here's my point. The way this is what my dad saw. The only way and of course, again, we're a small farm. Well, we're not. According to the USDA, we're a big farm now
You're
based on
big, yeah.
sales. But we're a small farm. All right. Only way for a small farm to actually break the rat race, that wheel of I've got to get bigger, 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 because of the things you described. The lamb's still only 170, and the pickup's gone up whatever, eight times. Okay. The only way to break that is for us to keep up with the value added portion, which is the cost of trucks, the cost of labor, the cost of
Yeah.
energy, all those things that have escalated so high. If we can continue reaping the processing, marketing, and distribution value added end, then the farmer, shall I say, we get to step into the pond that the middleman has made for us. And
Yeah.
so if you were able to do, let's just say 200 lambs, if you were able to triple your value of 200 lambs, guess what? Suddenly the pressure for you to grow more lambs would diminish because, hey, I got this nice little full-time salary here paid off of just 200 lambs, and suddenly that pressure to scale eases off.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense because at the end of this, on the farmer's end and on the consumer end, food is the freedom. That
Yes.
is, I mean, if you can't feed your country, you don't have freedom. I don't care what you say. And in 2023, we became a net importer of food, so that has put us where we're at. But for the farmer and for the consumer, that food is freedom. And for me, we have to protect it at all costs because we're effectively outsourcing it to other countries.
Right.
We are giving our freedoms away. We're selling our corporations out to Chinese owned companies. It is all the way across the board. And if people don't open up their eyes here pretty quick, they're going to be in a bad spot.
Yeah, if any country that can't feed itself is extremely vulnerable, and that you're exactly right. And so, so this idea, I mean, I'm sure you've seen it. I've certainly watched it in my lifetime. This, these these economists, professors, and stuff in the ivory towers writing about, well, we can't afford to let land that could house a silicon chip factory. We can't allow that land to grow sheep. I mean, I
Yeah,
remember going to a xeriscaping conference in Phoenix back a few years ago. One of the other speakers, I was one of the speakers, but one of the other speakers was from Las Vegas, and she put up a chart. You're going to love this. She put up a chart. So Las Vegas, Nevada. I mean, we're in a desert, okay?
sure.
And she put up a chart comparing the value of a gallon of water growing an onion in an irrigated vegetable patch versus a gallon of water in a jacuzzi in a Las Vegas casino. And the gallon of water growing the onion was worth 20 cents. The gallon of water in the jacuzzi was worth $150. Now, which one do you think is going to get priority in in government planning? It ain't going to be
Exactly.
it ain't going to be the onion. It's going to
No,
be the jacuzzi. But
but
I sat there. I was literally had my mouth open. I just couldn't believe. You mean bureaucrats, bean counters sit and they actually figure this out? I mean,
but they do. That's where your tax dollars are going.
right, they
Hopefully
do.
Elon Musk is about to fire every one
Yeah,
of them
yeah,
because but that's really, I mean, that's how they put a pencil to it. This is what should terrify Americans.
yeah,
That's how they quantify how they're going to spend money.
yeah.
Is they figure out that the water's worth more in a jacuzzi so people can go on a vacation and boil in it than have lunch tomorrow. And this is where the priorities lie, and where your priorities lie, so shall ye be. And that's how we found ourselves in these situations. We haven't prioritized agriculture, and that's something that I really truly hope to see. And I hope you and I are involved at some level on what's about to happen here in this country, because I truly do feel like people are ready for a change and people want to change. And with this new Secretary of Ag coming in, Mrs. Rowlands, I hope that it's different. And I hope they truly do see what's happening, and that we have to have change in this country. Because if we don't see change, and if these things don't change, I don't see much future for a lot of these folks in agriculture, because they will continue to cram down regulations. You called them the regulatory police or the farm police, but they're more like brown shirts. I mean, the things they do is very
Yeah,
Gestapo-esque. I mean, it really is. And you look at any country who kind of took over the population, the communists, Stalin, now all of these, first thing they do is go after the farmers, and they control that
absolutely.
food supply. Because if you control the food, you control the people, because you will give a lot up to eat something. You'll, I mean, it's a tale as old as time. You'll sell your birthright for a bowl of porridge. I
Yeah,
mean, they
that's right.
literally warned us that a long, long time
Yeah,
ago. And
yeah,
so I think that is what I believe everybody should push for and see in this next administration, and put on the pressure. Frankly, that's a lot that we can do. Put on the pressure to see change. Because to me, and it may be the same for you, if we don't make a change, we're all in big trouble.
yeah. There's an old Chinese saying that if you keep going the way you're going, you're going to end up where you're headed. And I think that applies here. If we keep going into the centralization, the consolidation, and the price pressure on the do you like the word first responder? I love the word first
Uh,
as applied to farmer. Okay,
sure.
if we keep marginalizing that and even criminalizing, uh, we're gonna end up. My wife and I just recently finished a book written by the family that housed Anne Frank's family in the
Hmm.
Hol in World War II in Amsterdam.
Yeah, yeah.
It was really interesting. So the book was about how they hid the family, how they were able to procure food. All it was just fascinating. And what was fascinating to me about it was that thousands of people starved in Amsterdam during that Nazi occupation. The
Sure.
ones who did not starve, listen, the ones who did not starve are the ones who had a cousin, an acquaintance, somebody outside the city that had a basement of potatoes, a basement of you know, turnips or something. Okay, that they could get out to, they could ride their bicycle out to, especially the girls. The Nazis didn't mess with them too much, and they could ride out there. And they could bring stuff into the city, and so the people who had a direct relationship with their food, those are the folks who survived. And I'm not saying everybody has to know their farmer, but I am suggesting that historically, I agree with you 100%. Food is the ultimate, control mechanism. It's the ultimate civilizational, it's the final thing. I mean, you can go a while, not being warm and not being cool, and
Yeah.
uh, but boy, if you don't have food, you're in trouble.
And that's why I ask people, I say, what would you give up to assure that your children didn't go to bed on an empty stomach? I mean, there are a lot of things that I am fairly certain a lot of parents would give up to make sure that that never happened but I don't believe that people realize how close we are and how fragile our food system is at the moment. And it's time we bolster that. It's time we assure that that is there for the future. And I hate to say it, but we as farmers are a lot to blame on this, and you've done an exceptional job where others haven't of telling our side of the story. For far too long, we have hid, we have
Yep.
not wanted.
Mhm.
I mean, my family's getting to be pretty good about it. In the beginning, they were like, "Yeah, we're not letting anybody on. Don't want to talk to reporters, no documentary crews, none of this." And since COVID and stuff, we've realized that we have to be part of the solution, that we have to start telling our own story, because if we let the climate change folks tell it, if we let the politicians tell it, if we let the big packers and big ag tell our story, we end up nowhere, and we're going to stay exactly where we're at. But I like to say, I think you've done a phenomenal job at telling your story and educating the public, because honestly, that's our failure. That is our fault, that we have let these other folks define us. And as we can change that culture, I think that it's really going to play well for farmers and ranchers. I mean, one of my favorite shows of all time to watch on TV is Clarkson Farms. I mean, that Jeremy Clarkson, that guy kills me, but he tells about ag in a way that makes it tells the true story. It tells exactly what's happening, but it opens the eyes to the public. And I mean, it is highly entertaining.
It is, and of course the accent doesn't hurt any.
No, I know. It's anybody who hasn't watched it, you have got to go watch it. It is worth every penny.
Yeah,
And two, but you're also seeing agriculture romanticized. I mean, look at Yellowstone. I mean, like it, hate it, what it is. It has told a story, albeit kind of outlandish sometimes, but it throws it in there, the plight of what ranchers are going. I mean, we're not killing people and throwing them in the train station, but we are being owned by these big packers, and the struggle is real.
yeah,
And I've actually noticed, and it's almost sad to say, but I've actually noticed since Yellowstone started, I mean, moving sheep down the highway and things, people have been a lot more patient. People have not drove through the middle of them honking their horns. They pull their phone out and record you going down the road instead of yelling at you out the
mhm,
window. And
yeah.
and I think that's a good thing. I mean, yeah, it's not the perfect story, but we have to do more of this, and we have to start advocating for ourselves. And I know that you and I both have places to be today. We have things to speak on this afternoon, and we're both speaking at the same place, the Farmers Gratitude Summit, with those guys. I mean, it's going to be a good day. But in the end of all of this, I mean, if you had to leave folks with one thing, and you needed to see one thing change, what would that be? Where should we go from here?
Well, what I always
Pick
encourage,
one. Pick one.
pick one. The one I like is, don't underestimate the power of an intentionally made decision. Where we are today, like it, don't like it, whatever it is, but where we are today is a physical manifestation of trillions of decisions that people have made, before now. And where we will be in 20, 30 years is also going to be a physical manifestation of all the trillions of decisions that we all make between now and then. And so don't ever underestimate. Well, I can't make it that decision. No, your decision to get a bushel of tomatoes at farmers market and can them yourself instead of going on the Caribbean cruise while everybody's got tomatoes up the wazoo right before frost. Those decisions are powerful. Those
Yeah.
decisions are big, and be encouraged that your decisions today provide the platform for whether tomorrow will be hope and help or hopeless and helpless. And we can be a part of that solution.
No, and I think you're spot on, Joel. Thank you for joining me today. I'm sure this is the first of many conversations because it's just too good to not. So thank you for joining me. Like I say, we'll see you this afternoon on the Farmers Gratitude Summit. And again, take it easy.
You too. Thank you, Carson. Thank you so much.
Thanks, buddy.
Good to be with you.
Thanks for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, hit that like button, subscribe to the podcast, and make sure you turn on your notifications so you know when we release a new episode. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all soon.